During my kindergarten interview, and of course I don't remember this story, my mother does, and she told me how it happened. So during that interview I was given a characterless rag doll. Characterless because you couldn't say whether it's a girl or a boy, if it was rich or poor, whether it was fair skin, dark skin. It didn't have a complexion, it was just white in color. I played with it for some time, and then I went up to the teacher and I asked for the rest of it. I asked, where is the rest of the doll? So the teacher looked at me and she said, well, there is no rest. This is the entire doll. And I said, I don't know how to play with it. And I returned it. Thankfully, that school didn't return me because of that act. They took me in and I got admission to that only school that my parents had filled a form for. But 40 years later, I try to make sense of my kindergarten admission story. I think I know where I was stuck. Without a character, without giving that doll, giving itself an identity, I didn't know what to make of it. I couldn't give it a name. I couldn't give it a home. I couldn't give it a family, a life, a belonging. In other words, I didn't know how to create that story in my head while playing with it. And I think I wanted to empathize with that doll, and that look, the rest of the doll would have sort of filled up the blanks for me, and I could have played with it more meaningfully. When that was missing, I didn't know where to put that doll, so I returned it. I suspect the teacher understood my actions. I believe so. That's the story I tell myself, and she understood something that even I didn't or my parents didn't. I showed empathy at that point of time, and of course I say that with a lot of understanding, a mature understanding of being a children's storyteller. But I do understand that there's a lot more interconnectedness between storytelling and experiential learning and, let's say, play with it. So that's what here we are to talk about. On today's episode of the Storied Way Perspective, we are joined by Dr. Shweta Verma, co founder of Guinea's Planet and Guinea Ki Dunya Foundation. A passionate social entrepreneur and a seasoned social work professional, Shweta brings over 20 years of experience working across mental health, disability rights, gender, and child protection. Through her innovative approach, she's changing the way we talk to children about diversity, empathy, and inclusion. Not with jargon, in fact, but with stories, play, art, and imagination. At the heart of this mission is Ginny, a doll, a character, and a conversation starter. Pretty much like the doll that I was given, or perhaps even much better, it's a well rounded character. Ginny helps children explore big ideas in simple, relatable terms, making space for empathy in classrooms, homes, and communities. Through Guinea's Planet, a social enterprise, Shweta and her team design workshops, storybooks, games, and activity zones that engage children in fun yet powerful experiences. Today, we dive into how storytelling, experiential learning, and play can be powerful tools for building a more inclusive future, one child, one story at a time. Welcome to the Storied Way Perspective, Shweta. Thank you for taking our time to have this conversation with me.
Hi, Ritu. Happy to be here and thank you for inviting me.
I told you that story about the doll that I was given. And your venture, your work also anchors around a physical doll. So tell us about Guinea. Show us Guinea and tell her all about it. And tell us, how did you sort of conceive the idea of having a doll to bring about conversations about empathy with children?
Okay, so let me start with the doll first. So she's Ginny, and when we launched her in 2019, she was 4. So now she's 9 years old. She's soon going to turn 10. Um Ginny is somebody who loves to play football. She loves rainfall. She loves to run, and she wears these spectacles from an early age because that is what doctor advised her. There are some things that you notice about Guinea when you are with her, and that is, for example, most of the people we know may have 10 fingers including thumbs. She has 9 in her hands, and her right arm is slightly shorter than the left, and that's who Guinea is. So through her stories and through our doll making workshops and through other conversations, we bring Guinea into conversation with kids and talk about diversity. So the question around how did Guinea emerge in this whole scenario. So that starts with me and my personal journey and my professional journey as well. I am a social work professional and my work has been in the disability rights. But was that the only reason why I launched Guinea's Planet? The answer is no. I was probably happy with what I was doing and settled in my life and content with how things were happening in diversity and inclusion field till my son was born in 2016. And he was born with multiple health conditions and a disability. One of them is like similar to Guinea, not all. And then I realized that, when other people didn't know who I was, like as a professional, when they knew who I was as a mom of a child like my son's, the conversations changed. And in the parks, in the hospitals, other children were always curious about each other. They want to connect with each other. I noticed that a few times a child would point at my son and ask the parent what happened to his hand. And the other parent, on most occasions, would want to, just end the conversation soon by saying something like, well, he's just gotten hurt and he'll be fine very soon. Which is obviously not true for my son. That was the permanent condition that he was born with. It was not going to change very soon. It was not going to be fine very soon if fine is a definition. So he was going to live with it and he is living with it. So I started thinking about this and I realized that although as disability rights professionals we worked a lot in different ways, but somehow the discomfort around the whole differences in bodies and behaviors, this discomfort still remains. And I started thinking as to why this is happening. And then if actually parents don't speak to children openly, when a child is asked a question very openly, then how would this child know what to do next or what to think next? Of course, they'll form their own opinion. I'm sure this child would definitely, speak to other kids and actually figure it out themselves if they felt that their parents are not telling them enough. Maybe that will definitely happen. But the reality is that what is making parents so hesitant, and can we help them change that? And that was the thought that led to this decision at my end that, I must do something about it to change this, because if nobody is speaking to children about diversity, inclusion, disability in a simple manner, responding to their questions, if nobody is speaking about that when they ask, then they will grow with whatever thoughts or opinions they have. And that's not something that I was very comfortable with, because my son, and not just him, like every child is going to meet peer group. And if peer group is not talking about things openly and a sensitive way, of course, then where is the world going? Then we're all living with our opinions and not changing anything. So I wanted to change that. Wanted to change this for children, for all children, and wanted to change this for parents and teachers as well. That if they are uncomfortable, how do we create something that, that is a product or a workshop that actually helps them do what they may have to do, that bring these conversations out in open and simple and fun ways. So that was the decision that I took before 2019. So that led to me becoming a social entrepreneur and thinking of ways in which this can be brought to the world.
That's very, very, very intimate and very powerful purpose behind your venture, behind the cause of why you're doing what you're doing. But let me ask you a more honest question from a mother to another mother. Are you really trying to create a more inclusive world for your child, where your child can belong, can feel counted, can feel known, seen, accepted by doing this in front of him? Because your child is seeing you build this world consciously with purpose, creating a doll like him. Because when he goes to a toy store, he will not find a doll like him. He would, if he's a boy, if he likes certain characters, play toys, or maybe superheroes, like a lot of boys like at a certain age, he may not find a disabled or a special superhero. They will have special abilities, and therefore his finding himself seen or being cast in a certain role, or even in society around him, in school maybe, are you trying to create a better world, or let's say trying to get create a world where your child feels that he counts?
So, even if Guinea was not like this, the way she's been created, there is a reason why Guinea is like this, and that is part of the research that we did. But that is my reason for starting Guinea's Planet at the end of the day. That, every child, like mine and unlike mine, should feel that they have a space in this world
Mm.
and that they belong to this place, and that imperfection is part of life. The fact that your body or your behavior is different from other people, it's not necessarily entirely different, because there will always be somebody like you and there will always be somebody who's not like you. The idea is, how do we become a part of this and how do I get accepted into this world? So, yes, at the end of the day, it started off with my son, but as a professional and as a person all these years, that has been my work in any case. I mean, diversity and inclusion has been my work, and I am fully committed to this. It's just that maybe the birth of my son triggered this idea that, oh my God, we've not been speaking to children, because the disability rights field treats children as service users typically, and not necessarily as people who need to be spoken to about certain conversations. So either things get clubbed into sensitizations and orientations, or just services if the child is a child with disability. Definitely, it's a change for my son, but for all children, because my focus as Guinea's Planet is not just on children with disabilities, it is on all children. Every child will feel like an odd one out at one stage or the other. So, how are we creating open spaces to make sure that people are able to speak about it if they feel so, and ask for their rights if they feel so, or confront if they need to? Uh, people should be able to stand for each other and with each other. So, yes, for my son and other kids as well.
While you're saying it, I'm also thinking that we see that the inequalities in society, we see the, let's say, lack of opportunities for children who are different, children and adults who are different, with disability or special needs for that matter. But then there is that, the gap that we see with children, whether they see it as a need for themselves, or as adults we see that even if my child doesn't has not doesn't have a special need, but I want him to understand that there are children with needs and I want him to coexist. So one is, of course, that gap that you see. Do you think children seek that information, seek that learning, seek that experience of understanding that there are I'm different, or there are children like me who are different than me? So are children seeking this information, this knowledge? Like you said, that child who looked at your child and said, why does he have a hand like that, what's wrong with his hand? So there is that behavior that we are seeing in children. They're naturally empathetic, they're naturally curious, they naturally want to know, why does this person doesn't look like me, or why is he wearing a special shoe or glasses or things like that? So how do children respond to disability when they are not told anything about it? And what does it teach you about empathy or the scope of work that you're doing?
So there are probably two ways to look at it. One is that what if a child grows looking at all kinds of people around himself or herself or themselves? It could be children watching other children with disabilities, looking at somebody who has a different complexion, skin color as compared to them, who speaks differently as compared to them, wears different kinds of clothes. So, when a child is growing, looking at all these things around them, a child is likely to absorb that as a usual part of being in this society. The more they see diversity around them and see this is part of life, the more they'll grow up accepting it, that this is part of life. Yes, I mean, you can't wish away diversity, it's a fact. Then the other part is, okay, but there are children who would not be seeing so much of diversity because they are going to specific schools where this may not be seen so evidently. And when I say this, I mean any kind of diversity, not just disability. Or they may be living in spaces where you're just living with people like your own in many shapes and sizes, but more like your own in different ways. So, what happens then? So, what I've always seen is, like you said, children are curious. The reality is that every child is trying to make sense of the world that they live in. And when they come across anything that they haven't seen before, they would at least look and absorb. They may not always verbalize the question. Some children would, some children would not. But are they trying to make sense of it? Yes. Are they trying to fit this into the world? Is this part of the world? Is this not part of the world? Yes, all the time. So, for example, when we do doll making workshops with kids and we introduce Ginny and we say, remember when we are going to make Ginny? Now, remember she has 9 fingers and her right arm is shorter than the left. So, there are two, three kinds of reactions we get. First question often is, why? Like, why does she have 9 fingers? Is it because she's a doll? So then we respond with that. Like, no, she's actually a human being. But it's not just dolls who have 9 fingers or less than 10 fingers or more than 10 fingers. Human beings do come with different kinds of hands, feet, bodies, behaviors. For many children, that becomes, especially with the young ones, that becomes the first conversation, first brush with this reality. Oh, everybody does not have 10 fingers. So for many children, that's a new thing because we work with children as young as 3, 4. That is the whole idea of Guinea's Planet. You start as early as possible without using jargons. And sometimes children find it slightly difficult. They say, no, that's not possible. This can't exist. And then we say, okay, so have you met anybody like this, who will not have, let's say, 9 fingers, 10 fingers, 11 fingers. And when people say no, then I'd say, okay, so let's wait for some more years. As we grow, as we find more people, you are likely to meet such people. And then you will remember that, this is a possibility. So everything that you've not seen so far is a possibility that it exists. So these are very, very interesting conversations that we have with children. Sometimes a child would say, Guinea is wearing specs, but I don't want my doll to have specs. So then I have to say, or we say as a team, that, if you don't want your doll to have specs, and if you think it's Guinea, then Guinea is not going to be able to see very well. Because for Guinea to see very well, she does need spectacles. So many children then will say, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But sometimes child will say, no, I don't want to make Guinea. I want to make
Hmm.
another doll. So, and this child is sitting in the Guinea doll making workshop. Okay, so we are making Guinea. So then typically we say, sure, you can make any kind of doll if you want. But right now, just let's finish making Guinea. And once you know how to make this action figure, you can actually make any action figure that you want to. So let's finish this process and then you move on to the next doll if you want to. And children then agree with that and actually do that. So, yes, I mean, there is a lot of, what do we say, focus on the popular action figures. And one would assume that if a child is insisting on one particular action figure, like they will not go anywhere without that. But that's not true. Sometimes even parents believe that if my child does not make the particular action figure and they make Guinea, they will not be happy. But that's not true. When children come and speak to us, we say, of course, you can make that, but just make Guinea first so that you know how to do this. And they understand that logically and they do that. So for us, this is an entry into a child's conversation about diversity. And we don't want to let go of that conversation and that opportunity. And we know that the child is ready to do this and one another. I mean, that's an opportunity for the child. So, yeah, children are curious. They try to make sense. They also try to confront you. And I enjoy all of that because
Yeah,
this is
it's
how
very
the
challenging.
conversations are. This is how conversations are supposed to happen. I mean, why not?
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
completely, and I can sort of see it happening in front of me as you're talking. So, you build a character, try and get the child curious about the character, that the character doesn't look like any other character that I've known or seen, or a toy, or not so, like a real child. And therefore, you get to have a conversation about the special qualities that make Ginny unique in this context. And then is that when the story comes in? The character comes first, the doll comes first, then you tell the story, and then children sit down to make Guinea. Is that how the process works? Where does the
Yes,
story come in?
if it's a longer story session, like at least 30 minutes or 30 to 45 minutes, yes, that's how it will be when we'll introduce Ginny, like I introduced her. And typically, then we just switch into there's a poem called Kaun Hai Ginny. That is the first poem that we wrote to introduce Ginny to the world and the diverse aspects of her life. It's a pretty fun poem when you enact it with children. So we do that. And then we move into the doll making section, where we say, okay, now let's make Guinea. That we've understood. And each part of this conversation is actually a trigger for many streams of thoughts, depending upon
Absolutely.
what age group are you dealing with, what is it that they're questioning. You can actually shift into any direction you want to take with children. So it's pretty fun in that sense that when we enact Guinea, then also it's fun within the whole poem. They say, for example, in one part of the poem, the sentence is कभी बहुत शोर मचाती है गिनी. So Guinea is really noisy. So then we all make noise, right? And that becomes fun. And one another line in this is कभी खुद को कमजोर भी पाती है गिनी. So she finds herself weak also at times. And there we get into this conversation. Okay, tell me what is it that you can't do? And when the whole group shares about something that they can't do, we normalize that aspect and we say, okay, so please remember this. Everybody in the world will be able to do certain things and we'll find certain things challenging. That's how we are as human beings. We can't do everything. So we have to remember people as these people who can do certain things and will find hard certain things. And that's the usual way of being. So depending on which line you pick up, what do you want that line to do in that poem enactment that you want to do, it becomes pretty fun. And doll making itself is, of course, I mean, because it's craft, children find it interesting. So it's a very, very interesting way of bringing diversity to them. And this gets consolidated because they've made Guinea now. They've remembered it. She has 9 fingers. They've made one arm shorter than the other. So yeah, it becomes like it's like reflection and then discussion, then consolidation. And then children actually ask more questions. Some of the questions we've not even have thought of, like so things like what does Guinea eat? What does she like to eat? Does she eat this? So a lot of stuff comes up then.
They're adding character to her. They're adding
Yeah,
character,
yeah, they
like I
want to
said.
know
Yeah,
more because I've already said it's a real person.
yeah,
So obviously, a lot of stuff has to be done in a real way. And
right.
the reality is, Guinea is based on a real person. And going back to the previous thought that you'd shared, how is it linked with my son? Or how has it helped? My son so far he understands how his hand functions differently from others, of course, and that's part of his journey that he needs to take on. But he's always known that there is Guinea who also has 9 fingers, because we found very few other kids who have 9 fingers. Of course, we've met them definitely, and not too far away from home ourselves. So it's not that he's not seen other kids, but Guinea is a reminder for him to say, there are people like us, and that's okay. So being different is okay is our tagline, and my son remembers it the most. you know, that's the good part.
Right. So as a children's storyteller, somebody who's worked with children for a long time now and understands how empathy building happens. For let's say people who are not familiar with this pathway of building empathy, understanding diversity, or accepting inclusion, or practicing inclusion. These are three different stages of, let's say, of a journey that you likely rightly said that it cannot be done in like a 30-minute session that you design a workshop or a experience for children. Again, you're bringing in storytelling, experiential learning, play, conversations, and through that you're doing so many different things which come at different stages. So for the uninitiated, let's weave this whole picture together: storytelling, experiential learning, and play. How does it come together to experience something new and sort of build empathy in a child, whether it's special needs, whether it is to do with any other aspect in life? How can this pathway be created, this learning journey, this experiential journey can be created for a child, and at what ages or stages does it work? So you can put it in context of the ages that you work.
Right. So I believe personally that, that the earlier a child sees or experiences something, whether or not they remember, but if it happens repetitively, it becomes part of their memory and experience, and therefore a part of growing up, and therefore acceptance. So if a child keeps seeing things that are slightly different than them or slightly like them, they're more likely to accept that as a part of life. So for me, when should you give Guinea or introduce Guinea to any child? A child may not remember the story you told them at the age of 1 or 2 because you're still reading out stuff to the child. But when they keep seeing the same character again and again, it builds into their memory. So it's like a 2 to 3 year old child who was going into their nursery admission process, and because she had Guinea doll with her earlier before she went into this school, she made a point to mention to the school that she's Guinea and she's my friend. So to say that you can't talk about empathy or diversity or disability to a child who's that young is actually false, because this girl, she cares about Guinea and she's sometimes very worried about her hand and knows that Guinea needs to be cared for. At her age, she believes Guinea's my friend, I need to care for her, and that's it. So at different ages, a child will take different possibilities with them, but the connection that they form with a person is something that needs to be brought into their life as soon as possible, I would say, whether it's through story, whether it's through a doll. So I definitely believe you do this sooner. Let them connect. Let them connect with Guinea or another doll or another child or another person. Let them connect with so many things so that this becomes part of their usual way of being, rather than thinking, all children are only like me. So that's one part. The other part is being open to all possibilities yourself as a parent or a teacher. Because if there are things, and all of us are uncomfortable with certain aspects, not all of us have grown absorbing all possibilities or accepting all possibilities. So obviously there'll be certain things as parents or as teachers that will stand against our notions, judgments, stereotypes, something that has been taught to us while we were growing up, maybe culturally. So even simple things like, what do you give to people as gifts? And most people in this country will not gift a doll like Guinea to another family on a happy occasion, because culturally people believe that if you give a disabled doll, it's almost like wishing it upon them. One, you believe that being born with disability is a problem, and this should not happen to anybody in the world. So that's one possibility that you don't want in your life, and you don't want this in anybody's life. So when I say being open to possibilities, I actually truly mean just being open to all possibilities. Whatever child comes to your life, whatever population you live with, whether it's religion or caste, region, bodies, behaviors, just be open to all possibilities, that all possibilities exist and you can't wish things away from this world. Once you become open to all possibilities, it'll be easier for us to have those conversations, with children around us, because children will always ask questions. If they don't ask questions, they're still curious. So, second part of at least being open to all possibilities will hopefully help you make sure that every child is experiencing a part of diversity around them without being shut down. This is not something we want to talk about. I mean, so you would not want to put your child through that situation. You would actually want a more open conversation, whether or not you know about it. So that for me is the second part. The third part is, okay, how to do this? I've become open to possibilities, and I am also accepting of the fact that the diversity exists. But now, how do I take it to the child? So one part, according to me, would be to keep experiencing it yourself as well, because if you're there with the child and you're experiencing it, the child sees that too. When they see you accepting, they also know that this is part of something that they need to accept. It's like in a situation, if I look worried, obviously my child will look worried too, because they think, oh, this is a situation where I need to worry. But if I look fine in that situation and I'm not definitely bothered, or I'm not showing an expression of unacceptability or disgust, my child would pick up the same thing. They're monkeys at the end of the day. All of us are monkeys. I mean, this whole weekend was about being monkeys in the workshop that we were in. Yes, yeah. So what they see, they do. So you become open to possibilities. You become accepting of diversity. The child will that too. But yeah, there's certain things that you will not know. And so expose them to different workshops, different spaces. Be curious yourself. I think that is the biggest problem that I find. That
I
sometimes as
agree.
adults, we don't remain curious and we think, I know what this will be, and therefore let me not send my child there. Till this date, when my workshop is called Empathy in Action, most of the times there will be very low registrations because the workshop is not called art and craft, is not called doll making. Sometimes it's just called Empathy in Action. So everybody has a view about what this might be. They are curious, but they've already formed an opinion. So I think parents, teachers, adults have to stop doing that. And experientially, if you do want to bring it to the child, you have to bring it in forms of every possibility. Whether you pick up different toys, whether you pick up different storybooks, and whether you read it out to them or you allow them to find or read on their own, but definitely find those places. So for me, the perspective that we carry is most important even
Absolutely.
before you do something. And that is the whole part, even when I work with my team on Guinea's Planet or Guinea Ki Dunia Foundation. We're first focusing on perspectives. That what you do comes later. I want to first focus on what you think, because that is how you're going to treat every child. So a simple message, for example, if a child comes and sits in front of us on a chair, and the chair is slightly higher and child is slightly fidgety, if we say to the child, sit properly, that goes against everything that we do. Because what does it mean by sitting properly? The child was uncomfortable on the chair, which was not meant to be for the child. So rather than saying sit properly, we should have done something about the chair. This whole perspective, at the end of the day, it's about perspective. What is it that you want to change? Do you want to change the child in front of you every time? Or do you want to change what's happening around the child? And my focus entirely is on, okay, of course, focus on the child because it's about child's thought that we're working on, but keep focusing on what's happening around the child and change that too. So for
Yeah,
me,
the
experiential learning.
child is responding to his
Yeah,
environment.
yeah.
If we don't look at the environment more closely, we will never be able to work with the child in changing his methodology or his approach.
I was going to give like one or two examples. Like, so for example, whether the workshop is with children or with adults, there will always be examples that we will focus on. So, for example, in empathy workshops, there's a lot of focus that eventually comes to beginner's mindset. How are you open to all possibilities and how do you approach beginner's mindset? Because a child is used to using beginner's mindset, right? They're making sense, they're curious, they will use this, but adults find it hard because we believe we know. So sometimes I will give different examples. So one example is, I mean, this is very funny as well, but that's how we learn a lot from children. So once we were playing cricket, and this is a story that I tell everybody. So we were playing cricket at home, and three of us were playing. So if it's cricket, somebody has to bat, somebody has to bowl, and somebody has to field. And there's a fourth person you could be a referee too. So we were playing with our son, and our son said, you know, I don't want to bowl anymore. So we said, okay, try the other thing. So he tried batting. After some time, he said, I don't want to bat as well. This is boring. So we said, okay, uh, what do you want to do? Try something else. So then he started fielding. After some time, he said, I don't find this interesting as well. I mean, this is fielding. This is very boring. So we said, okay, okay. And my son's name is Soham. So we said, Soham, so what do you want to do in this game? And what do you want to be in this game? You don't want to be a bowler. You don't want to bat. You don't want to be a fielder. What do you want to be? So here I leave it open to the group and I say, what do you think he said? Ritu, what do you think he said?
I think he wants to be a spectator.
No, he said, I want to be the ball.
It's
I
so
said, ball. He
interesting.
said, yes. Now I will be the ball and I will run from here and there. And then you be the bat. And then, you throw me anywhere you want to, of course, without hitting me. And I'll be the ball. So we said, okay, let's try. So we did that. So he became the ball. He would come running and we would obviously not hit him, but show that this is a bat. And he would run around and just run around as much as he wants to and then come back when he wants to because he's the ball. He can be anywhere.
Mm.
His idea of fun was running as much as possible and not being restricted by, only this
A
much running for
position.
bowling. Huh? Only
Yeah.
this much running for bowling. Only this much running for batting. Only this much running for fielding. That's not fun.
Yeah.
So he became
Yes.
a ball.
Yeah.
So the point is that he was able to think of that because he's open to all possibilities. He was open to the possibility of being a ball, and how important is that? I mean, to be open to all possibilities. Somehow there are stories all around us which experientially do tell us a lot about accepting different ways of being, accepting different ways of thinking, how one thing is not always done in the same way by all people and it shouldn't be. Why should you expect even that? I mean, that's the whole conversation in diversity and inclusion field. There's no one way
Absolutely.
to be. But it's through these examples and examples like this, when we do workshops with different age groups, that we bring it out in the open. And
Right.
that's the aha moment then for many people that, oh, yes, that is how
Right.
things can be.
The Storied Way Perspective is designed and developed by your Storybag Podcasting Network. Podcasting is a fantastic medium that brings listeners to gather around the story. As the podcasting industry grows by leaps and bounds, we at Your Storybag want to help storytellers, businesses, brands, and organizations leverage the power of narrative. We are not an agency. Instead, you can imagine us as a collective or a cohort that incubates and nurtures emerging story based podcasts in the airwaves. If you'd like to collaborate, commission, or create your own story based podcast, reach out to us at podcast@yourstorybag.com. So when you mentioned something about children saying that I don't want to make gimme, you also mentioned about parents not sort of stepping up when you say that it's about empathy in action. You have to sort of wrap your, let's say, offer,
Hmm.
or you wrap your proposition, or
Yeah.
that how you tease what you're doing, that
Hmm.
experience, that learning
Yeah.
behind something.
Hmm.
Let's talk a little bit about that, particularly with, like you mentioned, you've rightfully already mentioned that adults are uncomfortable with having these conversations. But if not this, it's like serious stuff. It's like saying that this is very complicated. What if the child comes back and asks me more questions which I can't handle, or the child feels that, I mean, this is too small an experience for me to feel gaga about. You ask me to make a Cinderella with a doll, I will be very happy. You make any other popular story character like a Harry Potter or something like that, I'll be very happy to make that with a doll. But who is this? I don't even know. So let's talk about that, making the character stand out, who's different, and yet make it aspirational for people to be part of that experience. Sometimes this, as storytellers, we do this subterfuge, I call it. You have to trick the audience into feeling that you're giving them what they want, but you sort of give them a new experience. But having said that, what happens when you are designing your sessions? What happens when you are creating this conversation, this learning journey with your audience? Particularly with adults as well. With children, maybe it's, you have to win and earn their trust, make them feel that, yeah, I care for it. Let me make it. Let me make Guinea first, then I'll make something. You mentioned that. But with adults, how do you create this journey with adults, with parents, with communities? And do you hold workshops only for parents, which are where children are not part of it, or are they always together?
So, starting with the last question first, typically what we do is that sometimes we offer space only to parents. So, for
Hmm.
example, if the workshop was on bullying,
Hmm.
how to identify and how to prevent, then generally parents would come in on their own. But there are times when we are holding workshops like in a very Mela kind of a format, where there are workshops happening on each table and parents have come in. So then I would sit separately with parents on one side while children are engaging in the activities that they like and they're busy with that. So they're both formats that we use. They don't have to be together. We have been thinking of planning, a parent child together kind of a workshop, but we haven't implemented that as yet. I think that is also related to my discomfort at some stage because I don't want to keep correcting the parent in front of the child. I don't want to. But that is what exactly happens. We hold back a lot. But for example, simple things like if we're making the doll and the child is now drawing the face on a circle, and we don't circle our different shapes and different sizes. Child picks up whatever circle they want to, and then they start making the spectacles, the eyes, and the smile, and the lips and stuff. So when children are doing it on their own, they're doing it on their own. But if a parent is around, sometimes parents, or most of the time, parents will say, make it nicely or use black for this, use red for this. So this is not the process that we use, obviously, because we are saying be open to all possibilities. Lips can be any color, eyes can be of different color, they're not always black. So that's a process that some parents are able to hold back and then see what we do differently, while for some parents, obviously all of us are,
Condition.
yeah, we behave like that. So we're yet to design something where that may not be happening so often. So that's one part. So that is one part of doing it with parents and adults. So the workshop is for different age groups, and definitely, and it's taken forward in a different manner. Now, how do parents respond to this, and what is it that we can do about it, or have we done about it? This feedback I've always received from people that we don't know what's going to happen in empathy in action. So even if I explain that the first step will be to become more aware of who you are and what kind of thoughts and feelings you have in different situations, going to what is it that we think about others, and then how do we connect with them, and different skills, and doing it in a manner which is accepting of yourself while being accepting of others. So that's the flow that I would broadly say. But I understand that it sounds still complex because it's not something where I'm saying first we'll do art and craft, then we'll do theater, then we'll do music. If I said something like that, it'll be pretty simple
Yeah,
for people because they understand these concepts. So yes, I think it's more of work that at our end, people haven't seen how empathy workshops can happen in a fun manner. People haven't seen how disability conversations can happen in a fun manner. So because they haven't seen that, they don't know that this is possible. So
right.
at my level, I just believe that we just to keep helping people understand that we have to be open to all possibilities because it is possible to keep things fun and simple, not use jargons, not use labels, and yet bring the message along. And for parents to also believe this other part that it's okay if you don't know everything. That's okay. Who knows everything in this world? Nobody does. And it's okay for you to say to your child that, I don't know about this, but I will figure it out and I'll come back to you with more information. Accepting that I don't know is a huge, I would say, part of being this empathetic parent.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So a
It's
lot of
accepting that I'm not perfect and I don't
exactly.
know everything.
Yeah, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, what is the worst that will happen? The child will believe that you don't know everything. That's a good thing.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Actually, it's a good thing. I don't know how many times have I said this. The child is not expecting you to be perfect, and why do we
Yeah.
try to be perfect in front of our child? We are so flawed. All of us are flawed, and so are the children. They are also flawed, and it's okay to be flawed. It's just
Yeah.
perfect. You have also, while there is the purpose behind your organization, you're creating a world. We're calling it a planet. You've created a doll. You've also created storybooks, and then you have workshops, right? So is there a hierarchy of your, let's say, methodology, or let's say your approach to while working with your audience, of course in an intimate gathering in a workshop, or
Hmm.
let's say making your content, your methodology, your process, your message available to people at a larger scale through your content? Because I know you're designing content around your core message, and you're using storybooks for that. So I'm trying to understand, when you are reaching out to, let's say, scale it up or to reach more people, what is the priority of processes, or the steps that you're taking?
So there again two parts to it. One is that what did we think originally, and then what happened along the way. Originally, I mean, so I've been a trainer all my life, so it's easy for me to think about workshops. And I always thought, so when I talk about that example of, okay, so we've not been talking to children about diversity and disability in simple fun ways, and we have to do that. So my first thought was, okay, how would we do that? How will I take my conversation forward with a child if I were to focus on disability, but not make it jargonish? So in my mind, I was planning a training. And when I thought of how, I realized, but I will
A
need
training
tools.
for children.
Yes. And then I thought, okay, but if I'm going to do that, what tools will I use? So I started looking at storybooks. Started looking at what kind of toys are visible. And then I realized, but I can't use all of that because it has a limitation. Why? Because if I pick up a particular story, there is something that I've introduced to my group about this child or the story character, but we don't know what happened next, because that's where the story, once the story ends, we don't know what happened to this character, because the author wrote that story because they felt like writing the story once for that character once, and that's it. So I said, but okay, that will work for some time, but I can't just keep working with that. Children are curious, they would want to know what happened next. So where am I building that? So that's where came our storybooks, where we said, there has to be character, there has to be series, where child is growing up like any other child. It's not just static in, you know, one part of their life. So just as you and I are growing and every child is growing, Ginny or another character, whoever comes in, will be growing too. And different storybooks will focus on different ages of Ginny and what is relevant for particular audience at that point of time, because everybody needs to connect with Ginny to understand what her life is like and also see, oh, this part is also similar to what's happening in my life. So that's where storybooks came in. It came in with this whole struggle that I had with, okay, how will I design my workshop where I don't have tools? And whatever tools I had, I felt I can't use them repetitively, because at the end, I will still have to move to the next step. So I wanted to solve that problem for myself first, and that is how the products came in. So first came thought of a training, then came thought of a storybook, came a thought of the character Ginny and Ginny's friend Sai. I was also interviewing a lot of children at the early stage before even Ginny's Life registered. And every child, whenever I asked them, okay, so what makes you keep a character with you? Because on their shelf or in front of them they would have a toy, and I would say, what made you keep this? So everything would fall down to two things. One was, who gave it to me? So if it was somebody who is precious to me gave it to me, then it's precious to me and I will keep it. The other part was the story behind this character. So that means there were barely any nameless creatures in their house. Unless it was given by somebody they loved, they wouldn't keep anything which had no name. If it had no name, they would give a name, but it has to have a name, it has to have a story, whether they have created it or somebody else has created it for them. So that led to this understanding that we can't just make regular dolls and just think diversity toys will change the world. Every toy will have to have a story or a character for a child to feel connected with them. So that's how it processed, that's how proceeded for us. As we move forward, so today what the scenario is like, we've realized that while we've built our books with notes for parents and teachers, and they're meant to be in libraries, they're meant to go to all schools and children, it is not easy for schools to buy these for their libraries also very easily. They have to be pretty committed to what we're doing to be able to take that call and say, yes, we do want these books in our libraries and we do want our teachers to use them in the schools. So there are few schools who definitely have our storybooks in the library, but there are many who don't. They're still sitting with the decision of, okay, when do we place the order? So there is administrative stuff that comes in the way when it comes to storybooks being in different places. The other part is the workshops and events. So eventually, the world has taught us that if you give us something which is art and craft, which engages children, we're happy to come and engage. And through that message, whatever we deliver is delivered, and that's good enough. Therefore, our events and workshop segment, that has definitely grown a lot and much faster and scaled much faster as well in Delhi NCR as compared to our product segment. Our product segment, the books and definitely the dolls, they don't sell so easily. The books, obviously, I mean, one, because for them we're targeting schools more or NGOs more or NGO run libraries more. But for dolls, it's the simple act of, if a child wants it, is parent ready to buy that? And second, doll is available, but is anybody going to buy it for anybody else on a happy occasion? Because culturally they think they shouldn't. So we can't change the culture so easily. So, it's going to be a long journey there. But yeah, the method is through acceptance and not giving up still, and connecting with stakeholders, finding collaborations, and scaling up through events and workshops.
Right. So your product sale is therefore connected to your events in that case. At your events, when people come for your workshops, do they buy your books and your toys?
So now, whenever we're running events ourselves, what we do is we do a package thing that, okay, you're doing this workshop, and in the price of the ticket, I mean, you have the storybook included. If you want to buy the doll, that's separate. And when a child sees the doll, child would want to buy it. Most of the times, we've seen the children do want to buy the dolls, and both the dolls, Sai or Ginny. Now, then it comes to the parents' decision at the end of the day. So it's not that children don't want it. The problem does not
Children
lie
always
there.
want it.
Yeah, yeah,
I know
yeah,
that.
yeah.
For parents who watch this, perhaps they'll be like, okay, it all comes down to us. We are the bad ones. We don't want to spend money on our children. We don't want to take them to meaningful experiences and spend money where it is worth, because it's going to create a better world for my child, or make my child feel a little more proactive, or some a better human in this world. We don't think about it like that. But having said that, let's not judge parents, because I think it's the ignorance of not knowing about the other
Hmm.
which has sort of created this ecosystem. And I keep talking about it with people, particularly in the diversity and inclusion space. I also work with businesses, organizations, corporates, and everybody's trying to create inclusive workspaces.
Hmm.
In an earlier episode with Shruti Pushkarna, we were talking about having organizations open up employment opportunities for people with disability. And again, we are also talking about adults in the world who perhaps know very little about people with special needs,
Hmm.
or people with uh, certain disabilities which are seen or unseen disabilities, and what are the problems and the challenges that they are facing. Have you tried to use your methodology with businesses, with corporates? So sort of, because even they are parents somewhere, some part of that audience is also parents, and sort of
Yeah.
taking this to that audience, because building empathy, building inclusion, understanding diversity is a big need today in the
Hmm.
world today, right?
Hmm.
Have you tried that approach? Because a children's story sort of opens up things. And again, I'm somebody who uses children's stories in adult workspaces a
Hmm.
lot, because and I've seen the impact it has had on people to experience and understand it. Have you tried to do this at all?
I've done it a few times, definitely, and it's always fun. We've done it not only with like employees segment, but also with, the interns and, employees of NGO world as well. So companies, NGOs, interns who are students. So different adult groups. We have run workshops with them, typically on demand. And sometimes the free ones that happens through Ginny Ki Dunia Foundation for NGOs. I mean, that is where most of the NGO teams come in. But that is also one area where we need to do better, I believe. We do look at more opportunities where we can be brought into, meeting different employee groups and focus on empathy and diversity. We've done that when other people have invited us. So there are lots of organizations who go into the corporate world to conduct these sensitivity trainings or volunteering programs. So we're trying to tie up with people who run these programs so that part of their work can be about empathy and diversity. But a lot depends, again, at the end of the day, on the choices that people make. Yes, one part could be, how am I pitching it to different people? But the other part is, do people want it in their itinerary or in their list of things that they want to focus on? And I hope that with time, more people pick up this topic and say, we need a workshop on this. We need a workshop on empathy in action. We need a workshop on understanding nuances of what does it mean to connect with different people. We want not just definition of disability, but understanding of disability as diversity. We want to know how to be around people who sometimes we feel are unlike us. if everybody started prioritizing it, I think my workshops will just shoot up in terms of the frequency and number. So I just hope that happens, and I hope that becomes a priority. I know many companies do have the intention, but I think breaking it down into different subparts and say, okay, maybe a topic like this, maybe a topic like this. I mean, we can definitely help people with that and then take it forward. But yes, creating demand that side in different ways is something also that we hope happens.
Yeah. So, Shweta, I work a lot with storytellers who
Hmm.
understand stories very well. They understand creating a character very well. And of course, like you mentioned, when you go to schools, if it has to talk about empathy and inclusion, there is so much of literature. There is beautiful children's literature available out in the world, which
Yeah.
that storytellers use. And sometimes we create our own stories to talk about it. But like you mentioned, that creating a character which you own, creating a character which is growing, so therefore there is that continuity of a storyline. And I loved it when you said that, when we started, this is how old she was. Today she's this old, and her stories will also grow along with that. I want you to sort of, using the example of Ginny and her world, explain, or let's say exhibit to perhaps storytellers who want to know how to create a, let's say, an experience for children around a character. Why storytelling, and why does the story growing? So if storytellers were to decode how to build
Hmm.
empathy around a simple same character over a
Hmm.
period of time, how is
Hmm.
Ginny doing it in her through her books?
Hmm.
And how can they sort of learn from your experience?
Hmm. Okay. Um, so I'll go maybe there are four books. I'll just pick up there are five actually. So I'll pick up one after the other and say, if I were to do this, how would I do it? So the first one is where Guinea is four, and the poem is Kaun Hai Guinea. I mean, there's in English it's Who's Guinea. So when we enact it, it brings in diversity in form of the religion, because in terms of the festivals she celebrates, what does she do on different festivals? How does she spend her day? Sometimes in hospitals. How does she play with her friends? What are the usual things that she does in terms of shouting or fighting or having a lot of fun, taking gifts, giving gifts? That is the moment for almost all children to connect with Guinea. Why? Because every child sees themselves like in one way or the other. And in fact, this whole conversation normalizes this fact for children. Other people also shout. And that's what every child does. Other people have keeps running around, and that's also what every child does. So how, simplest things like shouting become such a normalizing experience for children that okay, this is how children are, and so I'm okay. There's no problem with me if I do that off and on. Right? So that story, that particular poem is used in so many different ways to make them feel so connected with Guinea and at the same time feel so okay about themselves that, this is fine. If she's like this and this is like me, this is fine. Now, moving on, let's say you're meeting now a child who's slightly older, and this child is going to a new school, which is something that is going to happen to every child's life. So, there is this story called Ginny Ki Gargar, where Ginny is 6. So now Ginny is grown. But she's also changing school. So she's going to a new school in grade 1, and by now she knows that, yes, I mean, it didn't matter earlier that I had 9 fingers, but now it does apparently, because people are more curious and they actually ask about it. So she was pretty anxious about how the day is going to go, especially it's the first day, and how the day turned fun because of teachers' intervention. In that particular story, teachers hold a very, very special place, because that's how the day became well for Guinea. Friends and teacher, they were the core. So that story itself can help storytellers or teachers prepare children for the day one of anything in many ways, and also maybe help each other understand that why it matters to every child what a teacher does and says, why diversity in classroom is so important. Because in this story we also introduce Sai, who is a child who has vitiligo. So this child comes in, and this child is not wearing gloves or anything on his hands while there are different patches of different colors. So Guinea also takes off her gloves and puts it back in her bag, because she said, oh, this guy is fine, I must be fine too. Let's get on with the day. So that's Ginny Ki Gargar. But then when Ginny is 8, the story is there's something about Ginny. Now by this time she's much more conscious that the fact that the people stare at her, and the fact that she's now shorter in height. She was always shorter in height, but at the age of 8 she continues to be shorter in height as compared to all the people around her. That's part of her growing up, and people point at that and people think about that and people ask questions also, because it is so easy for people to ask questions, and like children and parents, no, don't you eat something, you're not healthy,
Why so weak?
Yeah. So, but for Guinea, it's part of her life. She's going to be shorter than other people around her. So this is a day where she's going to a different family for just like spending some time because the mom has work and she needs to meet that auntie, and so children have to spend. So it's like a play date, like a forced play date that many children, at least in urban areas, are forced into. So how that day turns out to be, and how everybody discovers a new aspect of Guinea that they thought they didn't know, and how Guinea also learned that people can accept me as I am with all my peculiarities that I go with, because by this time in all these stories what is common is Guinea's bag. Nobody knows what she carries in that bag all the time, except it's revealed at different points in different stories. So there are many elements of different
Right.
stories that storytellers can take forward and weave it into the way they want to, and
Yeah,
all of
so
them come
that's why it's
together.
a planet. That's why it's a
Yeah,
planet where
yeah,
you sort of so many things happening in her life, but everything doesn't need to come out at the same time, and they happen at
exactly.
certain ages.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you decide what to reveal when, and there's
What to reveal?
note for you at the back to remember what is it that we're talking about, whether or not children ask questions. If they do, great, take it
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And tell us something about the making of these books. What happened, the plot, the storyline, the character, the universe, that the planet that you're trying to create for Guinea. How is that? What kind of let's say team have you put together to make the books happen?
So for the initial part, I mean, that is an understanding that I had right from an early time, that our stories are going to be triggered by the real stories. These are not going to be fiction. You may not know which part came from where, but they'll all be based on real conversations. So before any story was worked upon, I interviewed children with disabilities and families. I also interviewed adults with disabilities and their families. And I took a lot of examples from them about their growing up time, what was interesting, what was funny, what was difficult, weave all that into the interviews. And then all those interviews were transcribed. And then the story team for us was Ate Bate Tales, so Vinita Krishna and Sangeeta Gupta. So some of the stories are done by them because then they have all the content. I also gave them my content that, when my son was growing up, this is what I was writing every second day. I was also documenting my child's journey for myself, and I also shared that with them. So they weaved in a lot of stuff from the transcriptions that they read, what they felt through those conversations, and they created beautiful stories out of them. So we've been able to publish a few and not all yet. Some are still waiting to be published. The story is there, but it has to go into production. In the initial part, we tried doing things differently, but then in the recent 2-3 years, we've established a process where once the story is there, the editorial team comes into the focus. So Manisha Chaudhary, who used to work with Pratham, becomes our core person for all the editing work. We always invite her and her team in to say, now let's make this into a reality. And we really value her, guidance in everything that happens. So that production team makes sure that things move to a finished line, definitely. While Vinita Krishna, because she's again a celebrated author herself, she makes sure that the conversation that we're trying to take forward through our storybooks are taken forward. So she becomes our ambassador on her own. So it's not just story team. This is like
Yeah,
these are like our ambassadors. They make sure that the stories are talked about wherever they are. And I'm just grateful to the team that it's not the team that I have put together. I mean, this is the team that actually came to us in different ways. I almost believe that they chose us rather than the other way around. And we're so grateful that they're in our lives. Vinita brought Suvidha Mistry, the illustrator, in our life. But Ginny, at the end of the day, was created by me as a character. So obviously, um, I did write the first poem, and my co-founder Jamal did write the first story on Sai, although that hasn't been published yet. So we did create the concept, and we stayed true to the concept, and we do have very open conversations on, like for example, we took a while to decide what Ginny's school uniform is going to be like in Ginny Ki Gargar, because she was going to be in school, and we decided what kind of school uniform, and we decided to give it pink and blue. So everybody was pink and blue in that uniform. A lot of discussions happened. It's always fun to
yeah,
take Ginny's life forward and decide what is going to be happening in a school, what the teacher is going to be like. And we don't have strict teachers in the stories ever, you know,
yeah.
not the scolding type ever, so yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I can see how that sort of opens up layers of the
Yeah.
character and her life, and then
Yeah.
growing with it. That's very powerful. Why did you not go to a traditional publisher to publish your storybooks? I mean, you could still do what you're doing. Your books would also be handled by traditional publishing house, but you've chosen to sort of do it in house. The book as a product, the toy as a product, then your workshops as another product. So
So we
why
we
not?
have been looking at collaborators since the very beginning. We have been looking at collaborators who understand why we're doing what we're doing. And we still want a co-publisher. Actually, we still want somebody who can take this on from us, while we remain the passionate people who make sure that the stories are written and the illustrations are done. We do want a co-publisher to go along with us, but we haven't been able to find that collaboration, also probably because of the fact that publication or publishing at the end of the day is not necessarily a very profit making way of being now, especially with, you know, even with the new education policy coming in. While a lot of focus is going to be on stories and use of art, but every state is also deciding their own curriculum, and therefore publishers are also going through their own journeys and challenges right now. But yes, we are looking at co-publishing. I mean, my whole focus was, this is why Guinea exists, this is the reason, and Guinea has to grow. So there are some decisions that have to be taken there, and who would be able to take it now forward in a manner where we stayed true to the spirit of why Guinea came into being. I think what also came in the way of finding a co-publisher very early on, or even now, is the fact that we launched in 2019. We were looking for co-publisher, and then 2020 lockdown came in. So 2 years, the world was just functioning very differently. So I think a lot of our journey, a lot that has happened in our journey, is something that it just happened. Nobody could have controlled anything. But had we launched and lockdown had not come, maybe things would have been different. But we did come back and emerge in a different world later on. So we do hope we'll find a co-publisher who can help us take this forward in a consistent manner, because you can't just have 4 storybooks per year. You need to have more. You need to give more to the world and keep everybody involved in Guinea's story.
I think the potential will also be, like you mentioned, getting the book out is the real challenge in your case right now.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think for a publisher too, they would. I know for a fact that publishers like series, but the series has to do well, and
Yeah.
that's where the balance between economics and purpose sort of has
Hmm.
to balance it out, so that it can make sense in the world today to sustain it. Eventually, it's
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
sustainability for everyone,
Yeah.
right? How can storytellers help? What can we do?
Well, one, be curious about the work that we do, and do come in and participate in our conversations on empathy and diversity. If you want to take Guinea forward into your stories, we'll be very excited. But we would want you to definitely come in for a conversation first, so that we can tell you more about Guinea. So that when a child asks, I mean, this is going to happen. Children are going to say, "So Guinea must be sad. No, she has only 9 fingers." So what do you say to that as Guinea's planet? We can definitely tell you that at different ages, what answer may be appropriate from our perspective. And then how do you take it forward in your conversation? It's something that we can help you with. But yeah, I mean, every storyteller is a creative person, and they know best how to take the conversations forward. It's only the discomfort around diversity and disability that comes in the way, and we want to take that away from you. So we would want to give you all the answers that you need on what if this child says this and what if the child says that. We have all the answers. We're happy to share all that with you. So it has to be a two-way thing. We are there
Absolutely.
to help you with the answers. Please take Guinea into people's lives.
So let me propose something to you. This is not something that I've checked with my tribe. I have, over 150 storytellers who've trained under me. Not all of them are professionally working as storytellers, but a
Hmm.
lot of them are. And we always try to come up with something that we can work together on. So
Hmm.
it's like a proposition to you. What if, we were to collaborate and create a project? It could be over a period of time, let's say 3 months, 6 months, or maybe a year, where we take Guinea and her world two different places, again amplifying your voice, but maybe not just in Delhi NCR, because that's what you do already here, but
Hmm.
in other cities, and maybe even in Delhi NCR, to collaborate
Hmm.
with you and create a project and see what outcomes emerge out of that.
Hmm.
Of course, we make a model where methodology is important, research is important, development is important, the style is important. Even every storyteller may sort of approach that session a little differently, but again borrowing from what you've already created and maybe creating something new, a new workshop, a new experience,
Hmm.
and learning from you also in co-creating that, and then sort of creating even an economic model, just a
Yeah.
basic sustainable model, so that it benefits you and them. And then see the outcome, measure it in terms of how many people did we reach, or how many conversations have we had, How many people did we bring into the fold? Again, to maybe create a, let's say, a sustained conversation with them. Like you mentioned, that having that one conversation with a person will not change the world, but having, the reason why you're creating these series of stories is because you want that conversation to continue over a period of time, at least for the child's
Hmm.
development age. So what if we were to sort of create a network or a web of working with storytellers in different pockets of the country, and take this message to the children, to the community, to the parents, and sort of see where it takes us. So,
Hmm.
it gives us something meaningful to work on. It also brings in a collaboration and also creates a learning experience for you and for us to see what are the challenges of working in different spaces. What
Yeah.
do you have to say?
Well, that'll be very exciting. I mean, that'll be very exciting. I mean, not just because Guinea is going places, but also the fact that
Yeah,
we are,
quite literally, Guinea can
yeah,
go places. Why
Guinea
can't she
and
go?
Kuru. Of course, she's going places, but also because, it's like the conversation that we want to have with different people. We'll just start off and it will just be amplified. I mean, that's the most exciting part of this. So we should definitely try this out and plan this.
All right,
Yeah.
great. So now I'm rubbing my hands in glee because I've been thinking about it, and then I thought of, this conversation sort of gave me that idea that, yeah, this is absolutely possible, because as storytellers we want to work with meaningful organizations who are creating an impact on the world, and children storytellers can actually collaborate and create more ideas.
Yeah.
To scale, to reach out. Remember, you and I had this conversation just last Sunday that, what's the
Hmm.
best model that we can create? We have to create a
Yeah.
model because there is no model in the
Yeah.
world today, and people like us have to put our heads together and say that, yes, we need sustenance is important, scale is important, numbers are important, message has to go, because that's where it starts from.
Yeah.
And methodology can evolve and sort of grow with that. So let's see what we can co-create.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Shweta. Thank you. This is a wonderful conversation. I've had a lovely time talking to you, and thank you for giving me your time and sharing Guinea and her world with us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation.
I did. I did. Thank you so much, Ritu, for inviting us over and hope to see you soon.
Hi, this is Rituparna. Thank you for listening to the Storied Way Perspective. This is a bi monthly podcast where you will meet storytellers, influencers, entrepreneurs, coaches, thought leaders, and experts as I ask them, what can stories do in the world today? You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and everywhere else. Look out for the Storied Way Perspective with Rituparna. No matter where you listen to us, please rate, review, and share the podcast. This helps me know you are listening. You can also write to me at podcast@yourstorybag.com. I will wait to hear from you.